You'll notice the sermon title is The Church of Higher Elevation. As it turns out, as I contemplated the theme of the sermons, it's going to turn into a series of sermons. And as I thought about a series of sermons, I couldn't help but think about Jim Marsh. I actually went out to the garden yesterday and had a little conversation with Jim at the Jim Marsh Memorial Landing. I was thinking about Jim because I actually bought a new sailboat. Well, new to me, it's a 1974. Irwin, by the way. John, I knew you'd be happy about that. And she needs a little TLC, but as soon as Connie gets her cleaned up and gets it then I think she has a few more years of life left in her. But I thought about Jim in the series because he was, as you know, an avid sailor, and apparently he often preached sermons around the theme of sailing. And I believe I've told this story before, but he was in the middle of one of those series, probably part 8 in a series of 10, and one of the little ladies who was about halfway down the sanctuary after he began preaching part 8, and she must apparently have been a little hard of hearing and spoke rather loudly. She leaned over to her partner and in a very audible voice said, "Not another sermon about sailing." So I hope you don't say, "Not another sermon about hiking in the woods." But I want to begin by sharing the story of two communities of higher elevation, two communities at 10,000 feet. And as you know, that's where we were staying the last few weeks in Crestone, Colorado, and it's almost 10,000, 8,500 and on up. And the first of these communities is an old mining town called Bonanza, available only with four-wheel drive. And I happened to discover the place. It was a mining town that cropped up in the 1880s. Actually, between 1880 and 1888, the town grew from almost zero population to over 5,000. There were 1,500 mines, and not gold mines, but silver mines, zinc mines, copper mines. And it just sprang up. A town literally just appeared in about 7 or 8 years. And then by 1890, from 1888 to 1890, the town declined from that 5,000 to almost zero. A little more than 100 people left. The mining just ran out. Well, I happened to get some of the historical information on Bonanza. And it seems that in this town, in its heyday, there was one doctor, there was a hardware store, 2 surveyors, 3 attorneys, a notary public, a furniture store, a constable, a justice of the peace, a school, a hotel, a watchmaker, an assayer, a meat market, a shoe and boot maker, a second-hand store, a grocery store, 2 hotels with fancy ladies, and you know what those were, a constable, and 8 saloons. And by the way, there were no churches in Bonanza. Now, let me compare that with another little community, the one we were in southern Colorado at 10,000 feet. And this is the town of Crestone. And these are the specifics on Crestone as of date. There is 1 grocery store, 2 restaurants, 1 bar, and 30 spiritual communities. I thought that was quite a contrast. Actually, in its heyday, in the cattle era, the mining era, there was a much larger population built around mining and cattle and even logging. But then about 30 years ago, something happened. The town had deteriorated, something happened. Somebody had a vision. And her name was Hannah Strong. She is a wealthy Canadian, still living, still spending part of the year in Crestone. She and her husband owned almost 2 million acres in the Southwest. And Hannah Strong had a vision of an interfaith community in Crestone. A commitment to education, to environmentalism, and to spiritual pursuits. So with the help of Lawrence Rockefeller, she created the Manitou Foundation and began distributing land 30 years ago to various religious groups, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Christians, each developing their own spiritual centers, and one by one they were added to, and now there are almost 30 spread within a 3-mile radius in this little mountain community. So the focus in the vision, the substance of this community is on personal growth, spiritual growth, social change, and spiritual evolution. And by the way, it was listed some years ago in USA Today as one of the 5 spiritual hotspots in the world. It's a little town at the end of the road. No one goes through it. No one goes to it unless you're interested in this kind of stuff. And that is where the Carmelite monastery, the Nada Hermitage, sits. It is one of those 30 communities. Now, nada from the Spanish means nothing. Nada. That phrase comes from St. John of the Cross, one of the great Christian mystics, who talked about emptying our lives and filling our lives in communion with the living God. The nothingness that leads to the fullness. And by the way, I'd like to offer some of you an invitation next year in the month of July to join Connie and me at the Hermitage. And we would like to take a group of 10 or 12 people and give you a chance to experience some contemplation, some solitude, and also to experience and be exposed to these wonderful spiritual communities. It really is quite an interesting place, quite a beautiful place. So if you have interest in going to southern Colorado for 5 or 6 days, it would be a very inexpensive trip, and I think a very enriching trip for you. And if you're a single or a couple, you would have your own hermitage, and I think you would have a wonderful time.